The wind carried the scent of pine and frost down from the northern mountains, biting through the thin walls of my cottage. My name is Alara, and I am the last healer of Willow's Bend. My mother's ghost was in every dried herb hanging from the rafters, in every mortar and pestle stained with memory. She had been gifted, her hands a conduit for something ancient and green. I was just a keeper of recipes, a girl who prayed her mixtures worked and that the villagers would keep their fear disguised as gratitude. That morning, I was grinding moon petal roots for Old Man Kale's cough when the silence shattered. Not a knock, but a pounding that shook the door on its hinges. 3 figures blotted out the weak sunlight. Royal Guard. Their armor bore the crest of the Silverfang King, a snarling wolf against a mountain peak. My heart became a trapped bird against my ribs. "You are the Omega Healer." The captain's voice was a statement carved from ice. His eyes, the color of flint, scraped over my simple wool dress, my flour-dusted apron, my ordinary face. Disappointment lived there. "You are summoned to Stone Peak. The king requires your services." The king, Alpha King Kalen. For 2 moons, whispers had slithered through the territory like poison. The invincible king, the warrior who had united the packs, was fading. A mysterious sickness was eating him alive. No healer, no alpha physician had found a cure. I'm not what you're looking for," I stammered, fingers curling into my palms. "My mother was the true healer. You are an Omega healer within 5 days' ride," the captain interrupted, his tone leaving no room for my breath. "The king's order specifies an Omega. You come willingly, or we carry you. The result is the same." They gave me less than an hour. I packed my mother's satchel with trembling hands, the weight of her legacy heavier than any stone. The ride to Stone Peak was a blur of frozen forest and silent guards. The fortress, when it appeared, was a jagged tooth of black rock against a gray sky. It didn't welcome, it consumed. Inside, sound died. Our footsteps were swallowed by the monstrous stone, making me feel like we were walking into the belly of a great silent beast. The air grew colder, cleaner, scented only with torch smoke and a deep, unsettling quiet. We climbed endless spiral stairs until the noise of the living castle faded far below. The captain stopped before doors of iron-bound oak, carved with that same snarling wolf. He turned to me, his expression grim. "Speak only when spoken to, touch nothing without permission, and understand this, girl. If the king dies under your care, the blame will land on you first. The packs will demand Omega blood for an Alpha King's failure." The threat wrapped around my throat, cold and tight. I managed a nod. He pushed the doors open. The king's chamber was a tomb of shadows and muted firelight. Heavy drapes suffocated the windows. The only movement was the slow dance of candle flames near a massive bed. And on that bed lay Alpha King Kalen. He was not what I expected. He was not a wasted skeleton, but a sculpture of strength laid low. Broad shoulders strained against a thin linen shirt. Dark hair, wild and tangled, spilled across pillows. His face was all sharp angles and paleness, but even in repose, it held a fierce, unyielding beauty. A map of silver scars crossed his visible skin, testaments to battles, not sickness. But it was his scent that truly undid me. It hit me the moment I crossed the threshold. Not the cloying smell of illness, but wilderness, frost-kissed pine, crackling hearth fire, and beneath it, something dark, wild, and uniquely him. It flooded my senses, wrapped around my lungs. My Omega core, a quiet, dormant thing, stirred violently. It didn't know what to do with this scent. It whispered danger and safety in the same frantic breath. An elderly beta attendant hovered near the bed, her mouth a pinched line of disapproval. "This is the healer," she sniffed. "The Omega healer," the captain corrected tersely, "as His Majesty requested." Requested? The word snagged in my mind. Why would a dying king request an unknown village omega? The king's eyes opened. They were not cloudy with fever. They were clear, a startling, penetrating amber, and they fixed on me with an intensity that stopped the air in my chest. He looked at me, through me, as if he'd been waiting. For me. "Leave us." His voice was rough, worn at the edges, but it resonated through the chamber with undeniable command. It was the voice of a man used to being obeyed, not a man whispering from death's doorway. The attendant bristled. "Your Majesty, protocol requires—" "Leave." The single word was a low growl. It brooked no argument. The guards and the attendant filed out, the door shutting with a final, echoing thud. The silence that followed was profound, thick with the weight of his gaze and the roar of my own heartbeat. I was alone with the Alpha King. "Come closer, healer." His voice was softer now, but no less compelling. My feet moved of their own volition, carrying me to the edge of the bed. Up close, the force of him was overwhelming. The heat radiating from his body was not the dry, sickly heat of fever, but the deep, banked warmth of a forge. May I examine you, Your Majesty?" My voice sounded small, lost in the vast, shadowy room. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "You are here to heal, are you not? Do what you must." I reached out, my hands trembling slightly. My fingertips brushed the skin of his wrist to check his pulse. The contact was a spark. A jolt of awareness shot up my arm, settling somewhere deep in my core. I forced myself to focus, counting the beats beneath my fingers. Strong, steady. Too strong, too steady. A sick man's heart fluttered, raced, dragged. King Kalen's heart beat like a war drum, a powerful, relentless rhythm that spoke of vitality, not decay. I moved my hand to his forehead, warm, but not burning. His breathing, as I listened, was even and controlled, no rattle, no struggle. "Your pulse is remarkably strong, Your Majesty," I said, carefully keeping my tone neutral. One dark eyebrow lifted. "Is that a problem?" It is unusual, given the accounts of your condition." I met his gaze, and in that moment I saw it, a flicker of something sharp, alert, and utterly calculating behind the mask of fatigue. It was gone in a heartbeat, replaced with weary resignation. "Accounts can be wrong, healer," murmured Kalen, closing his eyes. "Or perhaps your skills are already having an effect." But my skills hadn't even begun, and my hands, taught by my mother to listen to the truth of the body, were screaming a single, clear message. This man is not sick. The realization was a bucket of ice water down my spine. I was standing in the heart of the most powerful Alpha stronghold, and he was lying to everyone, and he had specifically asked for me. Why? As I gathered my things to leave, his voice stopped me at the door. "Healer." I turned. "Return tomorrow at the same hour, alone." His amber eyes held mine, and in their depths I saw not a plea, but a command, and something else, a challenge. "Yes, Your Majesty." Outside, in the cold, dark corridor, I leaned against the wall, my legs weak. The scent of frost and pine seemed to have seeped into my very skin. I had come to Stone Peak to save a king, but I was beginning to fear I had walked straight into a gilded cage, and the wolf pretending to sleep was the most dangerous thing in it. The next morning, anticipation was a sour taste in my mouth. I walked the same cold corridor, the eyes of the guards a silent pressure on my back. My satchel felt heavier, filled with useless tinctures for a fever that didn't exist, for a pain I was starting to doubt. The chamber was unchanged. Shadows clung to the corners, and King Kalen lay amidst the firs, the picture of royal suffering. But as I approached, I noticed the subtle differences. The water cup had been moved from the left bedside to the right. The heavy tome on the side table was now closed, not open. Small things, but they spoke of a night not spent in delirious stillness, but in quiet activity. "You're early," he said, his voice a low rasp that didn't quite match the sharp awareness in his eyes. "The dawn light is best for preparing certain remedies, Your Majesty," I lied smoothly, setting my bag down. I decided to test him. Instead of going to his side, I walked to the hearth, pretending to examine the quality of the ash for a poultice. "The attendant said your fever spiked last night. May I see the cloths used?" A beat of silence. "She took them away already, too soiled." "A pity. The sweat of a fever holds clues." I turned, watching him. His gaze tracked me without any haze of illness. "Shall we begin?" I performed my examination with methodical care. His pulse, again, was the steady, powerful thrum of a healthy alpha. His skin was warm, but the heat was even, radiating from within like a sun-warmed stone, not the erratic blaze of sickness. When I pressed my fingers gently along his ribs, checking for tenderness, I felt the hard, coiled tension of muscle, not the fragile give of a wasting body. "You are holding your breath, healer," he observed, his voice close to my ear. I hadn't realized I'd leaned so near. "I am concentrating, Your Majesty." I pulled back, my cheeks warm. "Your condition, it is perplexing. The symptoms described do not match the body I see." "And what body do you see?" His question was soft, dangerous. I chose my words like stepping on thin ice. "I see a body that has known great strength, a body that is resisting." Resisting what? The illness, or perhaps the narrative. I dared to meet his eyes as I said it. For a long, suspended moment, he just looked at me. The air grew thick, charged with unsaid things. Then he let out a slow breath and turned his head away, a masterful display of weakness. "Your imagination is as active as your hands, little healer. Perhaps the mountain air affects you." The dismissal was clear, but the hook was set. He knew I saw through the performance. The question was, what would he do about it? Later, in the labyrinthine kitchens where I went to fetch mint for tea, I heard the first real whisper of the world outside this sick room. 2 scullery maids were scrubbing pots, their voices hushed and frantic. "More arriving from the west, with Lord Varen's colors. They say he's brought 50 warriors as a gesture of support." The other girl snorted. "Support for who? The king's heir? There isn't one. It's support for his own claim when the king—" They fell silent as they saw me, their eyes wide with fear. I took my mint and left, my heart pounding. Lord Varen, a name from the rumors, a powerful border alpha with ambition as vast as his lands. The king wasn't just pretending to be sick, he was bait, and the wolves were beginning to circle. That night, unable to sleep, I wandered the deserted upper gallery. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, painting the stone floors silver. Below, in the courtyard, I saw movement. A group of warriors trained not with the loud shouts of daytime drills, but in grim, efficient silence. And overseeing them, his profile unmistakable even from a distance, was King Kalen. He moved with a predator's grace, correcting a stance here, demonstrating a disarming move there. There was no tremor, no weakness, only the lethal precision of a sovereign in his prime, preparing his forces in secret. I drew back from the window, Cole's terror and hot understanding warring within me. This was no simple deception. This was a strategy woven from lies, and I was now a thread pulled into its pattern. He had brought me here, an omega of no consequence, to be the convincing prop at his bedside while he readied for a war everyone thought he was too weak to fight. And the most terrifying part? He had let me see him. He had known I would look out that window. Confrontation simmered in my chest for 2 days. I played my part, applying cool cloths that were never needed, mixing drafts that were secretly poured into the chamber pot. I watched the parade of concerned nobles, alphas with slick, sympathetic smiles that didn't reach their eyes, betas wringing their hands while their gazes assessed the room's wealth. Lord Varen came. He was a bull of a man, with a florid face and eyes that glittered like chips of obsidian. He stood at the foot of the bed, oozing false grief. My dear king, to see the realm's strength brought so low, it wounds us all. His gaze then slid to me, lingering with a curiosity that felt like being stripped bare. And this is the famed Omega healer? How quaint. Does she show any progress? Kalen, in a performance that deserved a bard's song, let his hand tremble as he reached for water. She does her best, he whispered, the very image of fading hope. Varen's lip curled, just for an instant, before the mask of concern slid back. Of course, we must all have faith. But the triumph in his eyes was plain. He saw a throne soon to be empty. After he left, the air in the room changed. The false weakness bled from Kalen's posture. He sat up, his expression grim. "You see them," he stated, looking at me. It wasn't a question. "I see vultures," I replied bluntly, too angry for caution. "They don't mourn you, they're measuring the drapes." A ghost of smile touched his mouth. "Vultures serve a purpose. They clean up the rotting flesh." His amber eyes kenned me. "Tell me what you hear, Alara. In the kitchens, the halls?" He used my name. It shocked me into honesty. "They talk about Varen's growing forces. They whisper about a regency council led by him. They say the Western Pack is withholding its tithes, waiting to see who emerges strongest." He nodded slowly, as if I'd confirmed his own intelligence. "And the healer's quarters, what did they say of your work here?" "That I am a desperate gamble, that Omegas are for comfort, not cures, that you cling to superstition in your final days." The words were bitter on my tongue. "Good," he said, and the word was a slap. "Let them believe it. Let them believe I am clutching at moonbeams." He swung his legs off the bed, moving with a silent strength that made my breath catch. He went to a locked chest by the wall, opened it with a key around his neck, and pulled out a map. He spread it on the bed between us. "Come here." It was a map of the realm, but unlike any I'd see. It was marked not with cities and roads, but with lines of power, loyalty, and threat. Varen's territory was shaded dark. Other regions were marked with question marks or small ominous X's. "This," he said, his finger tracing the mountain range that held Stone Peak, "is the truth. The sickness is here." His finger moved to the western plains, to Varen's lands. A sickness of ambition. It infects the court, the border packs. They think my illness is their opportunity. I'm letting them believe it. "Why?" The word was a whisper. "Why not show your strength and crush the rumors?" "Because strength in the open can be met with strength, but a hidden strength, a strength they dismiss, that can cut the legs out under them. I need to see the full web of treachery before I bird it down." He looked at me, his gaze intense. "And you need to keep playing your part. Your fear, your doubt, your failed treatments, they are the mirror that shows me my enemies." He was asking me to lie, to be his accomplice. The weight of it was immense. This was treason to the realm's perception, a game that could get us both killed. "What if I refuse?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't threaten, he didn't command. He simply said, "Then you may leave tomorrow at dawn with a guard escort to the border. You will be safe, and you will never speak of what you've seen. But the web will remain, and the fight, when it comes, will be bloodier, because I will be blind to half the snakes in the grass." He was giving me a choice, a real one, to walk away to safety, or to step deeper into the shadowy truth of his world. I looked at the map, at the dark stain of Varen's ambition creeping towards the heart of the realm. I thought of the scullery maids, the stable hands, the countless ordinary people who would suffer under a tyrant's rule. I thought of my mother, who had healed anyone who asked, Alpha or Omega, loyal or outcast. I met the king's waiting gaze. "What do you need me to do?" Our unspoken alliance forged a new rhythm. By day, I was the worried, out-of-my-depth healer. I let my hand shake when giving him water in front of the attendant. I sighed heavily over my mortar and pestle, whispering to the beta woman about unstable humors and resistant fevers. She ate it up, her reports to the court fueling the narrative of decline. By night, when the castle slept, I often found a note tucked under my chamber door. A single word: map room. It was a small, hidden chamber behind a tapestry in the library, known only to the king and his most trusted commander, a grim-faced beta named Rylan. There, the pretense fell away. Kalen was no longer a patient, but a strategist, his body humming with restless energy. We would bend over the map, our shoulders almost touching. He taught me the language of power. See this mark? A loyal alpha, but his second son is married to Varen's niece, a pressure point. This supply route, if it were to be disrupted by bandits, it would strain Varen's forces without pointing to us. The Omega Council in the southern valleys, they are neutral, but they have eyes everywhere. Their reports are invaluable. I began to share what I gleaned. The cook's nephew is a guardsman in Varen's personal retinue. He boasts that their armory has tripled. Or, Lady Marin, who visits so sweetly, spent an hour in the West Wing library today. She was studying treatises on succession law. He would listen, his focus absolute, adding my small pieces to his grand puzzle. It was terrifying and exhilarating. I was no longer a passive observer. I was a gatherer of secrets. One evening, after a particularly tense council session where Varen had all but demanded oversight of the royal guard, Kalen's controlled fury was a tangible heat in the map room. He paced, a caged wolf. He moves too quickly. He smells the end, Kalen growled, running his hair through his hair. Then perhaps it's time for a setback, I found myself saying. He stopped pacing. Explain. My heart hammered. The narrative is that I am failing. What if I appeared to succeed? Briefly. A day of marked improvement, a rally. It would confuse them, make Varen second-guess his timing. It might make him reckless, force his hand before he's fully ready. Kalen stared at me, a new respect dawning in his eyes. It was a dangerous, delicate gambit, but after a long moment, he nodded slowly. A false dawn. It could work. But you would have to sell it, Ilara, to everyone, including me. The next day, I arrived at his chambers with a new mixture, a harmless brew of rose hip and honey, but I presented it with solemn gravity. In front of the attendant and a visiting scribe, I spoke of a breakthrough, a counteragent to the night chills. I made a show of administering it, and Kalen, the master performer, gave them a show. His color seemed to improve. He sat up with less effort. He spoke a few clear, coherent sentences about the spring planting. The news rippled through Stone Peak like a shockwave. That night, in the map room, he was grinning, a fierce, wild thing. Varen left an hour early. He looked like he'd bitten into a rotten apple. You were brilliant. The praise warmed me more than the fire. It was just a play. It was strategy, he corrected softly, and it came from you. He was standing close, the scent of pine and stone enveloping me. The bond between us, that strange instinctive pull, hummed in the quiet space. It was no longer just about Alpha and Omega, or king and healer. It was the connection of two conspirators, two people seeing the same truth in a world of lies. He didn't touch me. He never did. But in that moment, the absence of touch felt louder than any caress. We were partners in this shadow war, and the understanding that grew between us was a deeper intimacy than any physical claim. They will push back now, I said, breaking the tense silence, pulling us to safety. No, Kalen agreed, the light fading from his eyes, replaced with cold resolve. The vulture is impatient. The final move is coming, and we must be ready. He reached out them as if to touch my arm, but stopped, his hand hovering in the cold air between us. The unspoken thing, the bond that had grown in shadows, pulsed in that space. Stay alive, Ilara, he said, his voice rough with emotion. The realm has only just found you." Before I could respond, he turned and was gone, melting into the darkness to become the king his people needed. Dawn came not with light, but with the sound of horns, a deep, mournful bray from the west, answered by a sharper, defiant blast from our walls. The battle for Stone Peak had begun. From my place in the hastily erected tent behind the main gate, I heard it all: the thunderous crash of shields meeting, the distant screams of men and wolves. The air grew thick with the smells of blood, fear, and iron. Then a new sound rose above the din, a single, powerful howl, laced with undeniable authority and blazing strength. It cut through the chaos and was answered by 100 voices from our walls. The king was among them. The sick king was howling for war. My hands steadied as I cleaned a young guard's sword gash. The game was over. Now we fought for the truth we had built together. And as I worked, saving lives while the king fought to save the realm, I understood my choice had been right. This was where I belonged. The healing tent was a world of frantic red-stained chaos. I moved from pallet to pallet, my hands moving on instinct, my mother's teachings a steady chant in my mind. Bind the wound, stop the bleeding, ease the pain. The 2 guards Rylan assigned me stood like grim statues at the tent's entrance, their eyes on the fray beyond. The sounds of battle were no longer distant. They were a living beast roaring just outside the gates. The clash of steel, the sickening thud of impacts, the raw, animalistic snarls of shifted wolves. The ground trembled. A beta warrior was carried in, his leg mangled. I pressed a poultice of yarrow and cobweb to the weeping flesh, my voice calm as I instructed others to hold him steady. My eyes kept flicking to the tent flap, searching for a familiar, powerful silhouette. Then a new sound sliced through the din, a triumphant, gloating howl that was distinctly Varen's. It was closer than it should be, too close. A ripple of panic went through the tent. "They've breached the outer courtyard," someone yelled. My heart seized. The rear guard was meant to be secure. If they were here? The tent flap tore open, not a wounded soldier, but a brute of an alpha in Varen's russet colors, his armor splattered, eyes wild with battle lust. He scanned the tent and his gaze landed on me. The Omega Healer, the king's little pet. Varen wants her alive. My 2 guards moved as one, swords flashing, but 2 more of Varen's warriors pushed in behind the first. The tent became a new, smaller battleground. I grabbed a heavy mortar, holding it like a club, backing toward the supply tables. I saw one of my guards fall, then the other. The lead alpha grinned, stalking toward me. "Come nicely, you might even enjoy being part of a real alpha's court." Despair tasted like copper. This was it, captured, used as a pawn to break Kaelin's spirit right at the moment of his triumph. A shadow filled the doorway. Not a shadow, a presence. The air itself seemed to compress, grow heavy with unleashed power and cold, righteous fury. The attacking alpha froze, his grin dying. He slowly turned. King Kaelin stood there. He wasn't just dressed for battle, he was the embodiment of it. His black armor was scored and bloody, his face a mask of grim violence under his helm. But his eyes, his amber eyes, burned with a light that was terrifyingly pure. He held a massive broadsword, its tip dripping onto the trampled grass. He didn't roar. He didn't even speak. He simply looked at the alpha who had threatened me. The man stumbled back a step, his courage evaporating. "My lord, I was just—" Kaelin moved. It was too fast to follow. A blur of darkness, a wet crunch, and the alpha was on the ground, motionless. The other 2 invaders dropped their weapons, holding up their hands in surrender, paralyzed by the aura of the king. Kaelin's gaze swept the tent, taking in the wounded, the dead guards, finally landing on me. The fury in his eyes softened for a fraction into something desperate, relieved. "You are unharmed?" I could only nod, my knuckles white around the mortar. "The breach is sealed," he said, his voice carrying to everyone in the tent. "Varen is retreating. Hold fast." His words were a balm, steadying the panic. Then he was gone, back into the maelstrom, leaving behind a silence louder than the battle. He had come. In the midst of leading the defense, he had felt my danger or known it and had come.
The message was unmistakable to every soul present. I was under the king's personal protection, not as a possession, but as a person of value. The fight left the invaders. They were bound and dragged away. I took a shuddering breath, lowered my mortar, and went back to work, my hands steadier than ever. The king had shown his hand, and in doing so, he had changed the game forever. The battle ended at dusk. Varen's forces, trapped and mauled in the Silver Pass, shattered. The Alpha Lord himself was found among the retreating stragglers captured by Ryland's men. Stone Peak had held. But victory was not a clean thing. It was a weary, blood-stained silence that settled over the fortress, punctuated by the moans of the wounded and the quiet sobs of grief. The healing tents, now several, overflowed. I worked until my vision blurred, my own small chamber forgotten. It was deep into the night when I finally stepped outside into the main courtyard. Fires burned in braziers, lighting the faces of exhausted warriors and celebrating ones. And in the center, surrounded by his commanders, stood King Cailan. He had removed his helm. His face was etched with fatigue and the grim knowledge of command, but he stood tall, listening to reports, issuing quiet orders for the wounded, the prisoners, the sentries. This was not the performer in the shadowed bedroom. This was the ruler, bearing the weight of his decisions in the harsh light of consequence. He saw me across the courtyard. Our eyes met through the smoke and drifting torchlight. He excused himself from his men and walked toward me. The crowd parted for him. Their respect was a tangible force. He stopped before me. He smelled of smoke, iron, and sweat, but underneath it was still him, the pine and frost and strength. "You saved many lives today, Healer Alara," he said, his voice formal for the listening ears, but his eyes held a private warmth. "As did you, Your Majesty," I replied, matching his tone. "The council," he said, the word laced with a new sharp edge, "has requested an audience at first light to discuss the way forward." He meant the traitors, the collaborators, the fate of Varen, and my place in it all. "I will be there." It was not a question. He gave a single firm nod. "Good. Rest. You have earned it." He turned to go, then paused, looking back over his shoulder. "And Alara, thank you for standing your ground." I watched him walk back to his men, the weight of a kingdom settling once more on his shoulders, but he carried it differently now. He was no longer alone. Sleep was impossible. My mind replayed the day, the terror of the attack, the awe of Cailan's intervention, the endless sea of suffering I had tried to stem. I was not the same woman who had arrived from Willow's Bend. The healer was still there, but she was now intertwined with the conspirator, the ally, the woman who had been defended by a king. At first light, I dressed not in my simple healer's wool, but in a gray dress of sturdy linen provided by the castle, my hair braided back severely. I would face the wolves of the court not as a fragile flower, but as someone who had survived the storm. The great hall was packed, buzzing with tense energy. The loyal lords stood with pride. The ones who had hedged their bets looked nervous. And in the center of the dais, on his throne for the first time in moons, sat Alpha King Cailan. He was dressed in austere black and silver, no sign of weakness, his gaze like polished amber as it swept the room. It landed on me as I entered, and he subtly gestured for me to stand at the base of the dais, near Ryland, a place of visibility, a statement. Then they brought in Lord Varen. Lord Varen was a broken version of the blustering lord who had stood at the sickbed. His armor was gone, his clothes torn, one arm in a sling, but his eyes still held a kernel of defiant malice. They darted around the room, settling for a moment on me with pure venom before facing the king. "Alpha King Cailan," Varen began, trying to muster his old pomp. "A regrettable conflict born of misunderstanding and the uncertain reports of your health." "You mean the lies you spread and the betrayal you planned." Cailan's voice cut through the hall, quiet and deadly. "There is no misunderstanding here, Varen. You raised your banner against your sworn sovereign. You attacked my home." Varen's composure cracked. "The realm was leaderless. A dying king is no king at all. I acted to preserve the stability of the Pax." His gaze shot to me again. "And you conspired with this Omega to deceive us all. This is her doing, her witchcraft." A murmur ran through the crowd. I felt every eye on me. My face grew hot, but I lifted my chin, refusing to look away. Kaelin stood. The movement silenced the room. "You speak of deception," he said, walking slowly down the dais steps until he loomed over Varen. "The only deception was the weakness I showed so that snakes like you would reveal themselves." He turned to address the hall. "This Omega, Alara of Willow's Bend, acted under my direct order. She is not a witch. She is a loyal subject of remarkable courage and insight. She played a part in a strategy to save this realm from the rot of ambition. While Varen and his allies plotted division, she worked to preserve unity. Who here truly deceived the realm?" The silence was absolute. Kaelin's words reframed everything. I was not a shady accomplice, but a patriot, a weapon he had wisely wielded. Varen sputtered, defeated. The trial was swift after that. Evidence was presented, intercepted messages, testimonies from turned guards, records of diverted supplies. The web Kaelin had seen from his sickbed was laid bare for all. Varen was sentenced to permanent exile, his lands forfeited to the crown. His key supporters in the hall were named, their faces pale as they were stripped of titles and positions. Then Kaelin turned his attention to the wider council. "The season of shadows is over. The testing is done. I am your king, whole and in command. There will be a new way forward, one built on loyalty that is proven, not merely pledged, and on respect for all who serve the realm regardless of rank or designation." His eyes found me again, and he gave me a small, solemn nod. It was a promise. The game was over, but the work was just beginning. After the council, as the hall emptied, Rylan approached me. "The king requests your presence in the solar, healer." The king's solar was a room of light and books, a world away from the shadowed bedchamber. Kaelin stood by a window, looking out over his scarred but peaceful courtyard. He turned as I entered. "You faced them well. You gave me no choice but to stand there," but a small smile touched my lips. "There is always a choice," he said, echoing his words from weeks ago. He sighed, some of the formal stiffness leaving him. "Now comes the harder part, peace, rebuilding trust. Varen was a symptom, not the disease. The distrust between alphas and omegas, the hunger for power, it remains." "What will you do?" I asked. "I will start by appointing a new royal council, one that includes a voice from the southern Omega valleys, one that includes a master of healing to oversee the health of all packs, not just the warriors." He paused, his gaze intent. "I can think of no one better for that role than the healer who saw the truth of a king's lie and used her skills to help him defend a kingdom." The offer hung in the air, immense and terrifying. Master of healing? A voice on the council? It was more than I had ever dreamed. I am from a village. I have no noble blood. The court will never accept it." "The court," he said firmly, "will accept what I decree, and I decree that wisdom and loyalty are the only nobility this realm requires. But," he added, his voice softening, "it is your choice, Alara. Always your choice. You can return to Willow's Bend with every honor and reward, or you can stay and help me build something new." He was offering me a future, not as a consort or a mate claimed by bond, but as a partner in rule, a purpose that made my heart soar, even as it terrified me. I looked out the window at the kingdom he was offering me a share in. I thought of my mother's humble cottage and of the vast, wounded realm that needed healing of a different kind. I knew my answer. I chose to stay. The announcement was made at the next full moon feast, a celebration of victory and renewal. When King Kaelin crowned the establishment of the Royal Healing Corps and named me its first master, the hall's reaction was a mixed symphony of surprised silence, scattered applause, and the low hum of disapproval. I didn't expect cheers. I had expected this. As I stood to accept the ceremonial silver-chased mortar and pestle, the symbol of my new office, I met the eyes of the doubters. I saw Lady Mirren's tight smile, the calculating gaze of older Alpha Lords. My position was a fracture in their ancient, rigid world. But I also saw other looks, the hopeful glimmer in the eyes of the few Omegas present, servants and scribes, the respectful nod from battle-kerned Commander Rylan, and the unwavering, steady support in Kaelin's amber gaze from the throne. He had thrown me into the deep water, but he was on the shore, believing I could swim. The work began immediately. My first act was not in a council chamber, but in the still crowded healing halls. I organized the overwhelmed nurses, instituted clean water protocols my mother had taught me, and set up a system for inventorying herbs from the castle gardens and the surrounding forests. It was practical, tangible healing, and it earned me more respect among the common folk of Stone Peak than any royal decree. My second act was to request an audience with the elder Omegas from the southern valleys. They arrived, 3 wise women with eyes that missed nothing and a deep, serene power that had nothing to do with alpha strength. We spoke for hours in the gardens. They taught me about the subtle networks of communication Omegas had maintained for generations, networks the Alpha Court never saw. I, in turn, shared the realities of the political sickness I had witnessed. An alliance was forged, not of force, but of shared purpose. Kaelin kept his word. I was given a seat at the new, smaller council. The first few sessions were brutal. My suggestions on allocating resources to outlying villages were met with, the border defenses must come first. My proposals for healing outposts were dismissed as a drain on the treasury. I learned to fight, not with snarls or dominance, but with data. I came to the next council with ledgers showing how healthy villages produced more grain and stronger recruits. I quoted the costs of putting down rebellions born of sickness and neglect versus the cost of preventing them. I spoke the language of the court, but with the heart of a healer. Slowly, grudgingly, I began to win. Not every battle, but enough. A healing outpost was approved for the northern mining town. A portion of the tithe was earmarked for purchasing medicines. Through it all, Kaelin presided. He rarely took my side openly in debate. Instead, he would ask sharp questions of my opponents, forcing them to justify their objections, often exposing their bias. He was teaching me and the court a new way.
Our moments were in the quiet spaces, a shared look across the council table, a brief conversation in the library where he'd seek my opinion on a trade dispute, valuing a perspective beyond martial strategy. Sometimes we would simply walk the battlements at dusk, discussing the day, the realm, and easy companionship. The bond between us, the deep understanding, was the quiet, steady foundation of it all. It was a connection of minds and spirits, a partnership that felt more sacred than any dictated by fate bond. One evening, as we looked out over the lanterns beginning to glow in the town below the fortress, he said quietly, "They are starting to see it. The strength you bring." "They see an Omega who won't be quiet," I replied wryly. "They see a leader," he corrected, his voice firm. "And so do I." In that moment, the last of my old fears fell away. I was not an imposter in a world of alphas. I was Alara, master healer, council member. I was where I was meant to be. Peace, it turned out, was a different kind of battlefield. For every visible wound healed, a hidden one festered. The discontent among the old guard, those who had lost influence in Kaelin's new order, did not vanish with Varen's exile. It fermented in dark corners. It began with small things. My carefully organized herb stores were found disturbed, valerian root mixed with harmless chamomile. A crucial shipment of willow bark from the south was misrouted and arrived too late, spoiled. Petty sabotage, but dangerous in my line of work. Then came the whispers. They slithered through the servants' halls, the training yards. The Omega healer uses dark arts to cloud the king's mind. Her position is unnatural. She seeks to make Omegas rule over Alphas. The true balance of the moon is threatened. I tried to ignore them, focusing on my work, but the whispers turned to written words. One morning, a crude, threatening note was left on my workbench, pinned with a dagger. It showed a wolf with a slit throat. The message was clear: know your place or lose it. Rylan found me staring at it, my blood cold.
Without a word, he took the note and dagger. "This will be handled," was all he said, his face like granite. I confronted Kalen and his solar. The rumors, the threats, they are undermining everything we're trying to build. They make the healers afraid to work under me. They make the council doubt my proposals before I even speak. He was silent for a long moment, his expression stormy. "I have doubled your guard." "I don't need more guards, Kalen. I need the poison pulled from the root. Who is behind this? It's not just grumbling, it's organized." "I know," he admitted, frustration edging his voice. "Rylan is investigating. The trail is careful, hidden behind layers of intermediaries. It leads everywhere and nowhere, to disgruntled minor lords, to traditionalist priests, to those who simply fear change." He came around his desk, standing before me. "This is the fight I could not plan for in my sickbed, Alara. This is the fight for hearts, and it is harder than any war." "What do we do?" I asked, feeling the weight of the invisible enemy. "We do not back down," he said, his voice gaining strength. "We shine a brighter light. You will give a public address at the Midsummer Festival. You will speak not as a victim, not as an Omega, but as the master healer. You will show the people what you have built, what you plan for them. Let them see you. The truth of you is our strongest weapon." The idea filled me with dread. Speaking before the entire packed courtyard? But I saw the wisdom in it. Hiding would only validate the whispers. The Midsummer Festival arrived. The courtyard was a sea of faces. Nobles, warriors, merchants, farmers, Omegas, Betas, Alphas. I stood on a platform beside the royal dais where Kalen sat, a solid, reassuring presence. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked out and saw curiosity, skepticism, and in some corners, open hostility. I took a deep breath, remembering the scent of my mother's cottage, the feel of a wounded soldier's trust, the maps in the secret room. I did not speak of threats or rumors. I spoke of health. I announced the opening of 3 new healing houses. I introduced a program to train village midwives. I unveiled plans for a grand medicinal garden within Stone Peak, open to all who wished to learn. I spoke of a realm where a child's fever was as important as a border skirmish, because strength came from within. I spoke from my heart, and as I did, I saw the crowd change. The skeptical looks turned thoughtful. The hostile ones became isolated islands in a sea of nodding heads and hopeful expressions. I saw the Omegas stand a little taller, the common folk listen with keen interest. When I finished, the applause was not thunderous, but it was real and warm. It was a start. Afterwards, as I stepped down, Kalen met my eyes. No words passed between us, but the pride and respect in his gaze was a victory sweeter than any applause. We had faced the shadow not with swords, but with truth. But as I walked through the dispersing crowd, an elderly Beta woman, a seamstress from the town, slipped a small, folded piece of parchment into my hand. Her eyes were fearful. "For you, Master Healer," she whispered, and melted away. Alone in my chamber, I unfolded it. It was not a threat. It was a name, written in a shaky hand. Lord Torin. He was a minor council member, a quiet, unassuming man who had always voted with the traditionalists. The note beneath the name read, "He drinks with the captain of the West Gate Guard. They speak of the old ways and a necessary cleansing after the harvest moon." The hidden enemy had a face, and the real battle was just beginning. The name Lord Torin was a key slipped into a lock I hadn't fully seen. I took the seamstress's note directly to Kalen and Rylan in the map room, our old war room now repurposed for peace. The atmosphere, however, was as tense as any pre-battle night. "Torin," Rylan growled, his finger stabbing a point on the map representing a minor but strategically located eastern hold. His lands bordered Varen's old territory. He lost lucrative trade deals when Varen fell. Grievance and opportunity. "He's a ghost in the council," Kalen said, his brow furrowed. "Never speaks out, always agrees with the loudest traditionalist voice, the perfect shadow to pull strings." He looked at me, a new respect in his eyes. "Your speech flushed him out. He's nervous now." We devised a plan as delicate as diagnosing a rare fever. Confronting Torin directly would yield nothing but denials and warn his allies. We needed to see the web. I became the bait. Deliberately, I began advocating for a policy I knew would enrage the traditionalists, a proposal to include Omega and Beta historians in revising the realm's official records, which had long glorified only Alpha military deeds. I presented it in council, citing the need for a true and inclusive history. The reaction was volcanic. Old Lord Bran turned purple with rage. Lady Mirren's politeness cracked into icy disdain. And in the corner, Lord Torrin, he did not rage. He watched. His eyes, cold and reptilian, flickered from me to the king, calculating. I saw it then. The hatred wasn't just about an Omega in power. It was about the king who put her there. Kaelin's reforms were the true target. I was just the most visible symbol. After the council, I made a show of being upset, taking a solitary walk in the lower gardens, a known, less guarded area. My heart was a drum against my ribs. 2 of Ryland's most trusted men were hidden in the trees, and Kaelin himself watched from a high, shadowed balcony. He came at twilight. Not Torrin himself, of course, a rough-faced man in a guard's uniform, but without any official insignia. He stepped on the path, blocking my way. "The master healer walks alone, unwise," he said, his voice gravelly. "These are the king's gardens," I replied, forcing my voice steady. "Things change. Harvest moon is coming. The balance will be restored. A reminder, your healing houses are made of wood. Wood burns." He took a step closer, his intent clear, not to kill me, but to terrify me.
"It's working," I said softly, leaning into his side. His arm came around my shoulders, warm and steady. "It was always going to work," he replied, his voice full of a quiet certainty, "because it was built on truth, on us." He turned to face me, the last light gilding his features. "Do you remember the healer who was afraid to touch a king's wrist?" "I remember the king who was afraid to need anyone," I countered with a smile. He laughed, the sound rich and free. "We have come a long way, my queen." He didn't kiss me then. Our greatest intimacy was still the trust in each other's eyes, the shared silence that spoke volumes, the gentle press of his forehead against mine under the vast star-dusted sky. It was a love built on respect, a partnership etched into the very foundation of the realm. We looked out over our kingdom, a realm healing, growing, finding a new and stronger balance. The story that began with a lie in a shadowed sickbed had ended in the brilliant, honest light of a shared dawn. The Alpha King and the Omega Healer were now just Kaelin and Alara, 2 halves of a whole, ruling a land where, at last, every heart had the chance to find its own strength, and every soul could come home. Before he could take another step, a low, commanding voice cut through the gloom. "You will remove yourself from the Queen's presence." The man froze. We both turned. Kaelin stood at the end of the path, having descended silently. He was not in royal finery, but in simple, dark clothes, yet his authority was a physical force. He had not called me Master Healer or Alara. He had said Queen's presence. The word hung in the air, a seismic declaration. The thug's bravado vanished. He stumbled back, then turned and fled into the shadows, where Ryland's men would be waiting. Kaelin walked toward me, his gaze scanning me for injury. "Are you all right?" I nodded, breathless, less from fear and more from the word he had used. "You called me—" He stopped before me. "A slip of the tongue," he said, but his eyes held no regret, only a profound certainty. Or perhaps a truth spoken too soon. The point was made. He looked in the direction the man had fled. He was a messenger. Now we follow the message back to its sender. The thug, under Ryland's less than gentle persuasion, confessed. He was in the pay of Captain Garrick, the commander of the West Gate, and Garrick drank and plotted with Lord Torrin. Their plan was not assassination, too direct, too traceable.
It was sabotage and staged accidents on the harvest moon, aiming to create chaos, discredit my reforms, and force Kaelin to relinquish power to a restoration council led by Torin. We had them. On the eve of the harvest moon, Kaelin moved. The Westgate Guard was relieved by Ryland's personal company. Captain Garrick was arrested in his quarters, and in the dead of night, royal guards entered Lord Torrin's chambers within the keep. The old lord was at his desk, writing letters. He looked up, not surprised, only bitterly resigned. "You sow, the king finally protects his pet over the purity of the realm," he spat. Kaelin stood in the doorway, a silhouette of judgment. "I protect the realm from the poison of men like you, Torrin. Your conspiracy is ended. Your words have condemned you." He gestured to the incriminating letters. "Exile is too kind. You will spend your days reflecting on your treason in the dungeons of your own keep, under the watch of those loyal to the crown." It was a fate worse than death for a proud lord, to be a prisoner in his own home, his legacy erased. As Torrin was led away, the hidden sickness was finally cut out. The court awoke to a new, cleaner reality. The whispers died, starved of their source. Later, in the quiet of the solar, with the first light of the harvest moon streaming in, Kaelin turned to me. "It is done. The last shadow." I felt a weight lift, but a new, gentle tension took its place. The great struggles, the fake illness, the war, the conspiracy, were over. What remained was the future. Our future. "And the word you used in the garden?" I asked softly, my courage finding its voice. "Was it only strategy?" He looked at me, and in the moonlight his fierce alpha countenance softened into something tender and vulnerable. "Alara," he said, my name a prayer on his lips. "From the moment you questioned my false pulse, you have been the only truth in a world of lies. You are my most trusted counselor, my staunchest ally, the courage to my strength. A king does not need a queen to rule, but I," he stepped closer, his hand rising to gently cup my cheek, the touch sending a shock of warmth through my entire being. "I need you, not by the moon's decree, but by my own heart's choice. Will you stand by me, not just as master healer, but as my partner in all things, as my queen?" Tears welled in my eyes, but they were tears of joy, of a homecoming I never knew I sought. This was no bond of biology, but a covenant of choice, of respect, of love built in the fires of shared trials. My voice was a sure, clear whisper. "Yes, Kaelin, I choose you. I choose this. I will be your queen." And as the harvest moon shone full and bright over a peaceful, hopeful realm, the king and the healer from Willow's Bend finally found their happy beginning. Our wedding was not in the great hall, but in the castle's inner courtyard, transformed into a blooming garden even in the late autumn chill. It was a ceremony for the realm. Farmers from Willow's Bend stood beside Southern Omega elders. Battle-scarred warriors polished their armor next to merchants from the town. Lords and ladies who had once scoffed now wore genuine, if bemused, smiles. We blended the traditions. Alpha rites of binding wrists with a leather cord woven from threads of every pack. Omega rituals of exchanging cups of herbal tea we had prepared together, symbolizing shared health and sustenance. We spoke our own vows, not ancient, impersonal words, but promises forged in our shared story. "I vow to trust your mind as you trusted my hands," I said, my voice carrying in the hushed space. "I vow to value your counsel as I value my own sword arm," Kaelin pledged, his eyes only for me. "And together," we said in unison, "we vow to build a realm where strength is kindness and power is healing." When Kaelin placed the delicate silver circlet, a wreath of herbal healing intertwined with the silver-fang wolf, on my brow, the cheer that erupted shook the very stones of Stone Peak. It was acceptance. It was hope. Queen Alara. The title felt strange for a week, then it simply felt like me. Winter passed in a blur of purposeful work. The healing houses opened, staffed by the first graduates of my new apprenticeship program. The medicinal garden behind the keep, our garden, was plotted, its dormant beds promising spring renewal. Lord Torrens' former holdings were redistributed to loyal, progressive stewards. Kalen and I ruled from the same solar. My desk sat opposite his. We debated, we compromised, we laughed. Some nights were spent in quiet companionship, reading by the fire. Others in lively debate with visiting diplomats, where my perspective on trade often revealed solutions his martial focus missed. The bond between us, chosen and nurtured, grew deeper roots than any fated pull ever could. The first thaw came. One morning, a delegation arrived from the furthest northern pack, its alpha a grizzled old warrior named Yorick, who had been wary of all the changes. He came to discuss border patrols, but his eyes kept darting to the bustling courtyard where Beta and Omega children were learning herb lore from my head gardener. After the formal talks, Yorick lingered. He looked at Kalen, then at me, and gave a gruff, respectful nod. My granddaughter, she has a touch. Sees when the hunting dogs are ailing before they show it. Her mother says it's useless for a pack alpha's daughter. His old eyes met mine. Would your schools be for one like her? My heart swelled. This was the victory no battle could win. They would be honored to have her, Alpha Yorick. Her touch is a gift to the whole pack. He nodded again, a weight seeming to lift off of his shoulders. The final wall of resistance had crumbled, not from force, but from the offer of a better future. That evening, Kalen and I walked our now familiar path on the battlements. The setting sun painted the snow-capped peaks in rosy gold. Below, the lights of Stone Peak town glittered, peaceful and bright.